Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the IMAA's Insights and Innovation Series. Today, we've got a bit of a special one. We've got AiMCO. They are the industry body for influencers, which we're really excited to share today. We're going to hear from Josanne Ryan, Detch, and Heather, who all work on it. They're going to cover off a whole bunch of what they do, the purpose, codes, everything you need to know about influence. These guys are the industry body to do it. This is going to be recorded, so if you need to share it with your teams, we'll have that there. But without further ado, I will hand over to Josanne to take things over and run through the presentation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. As Sam indicated, my name is Josanne Ryan. I actually head up the AiMCO, which you would probably know had its inception in media audit for print. We also launched AiMCO, which is what we're here to talk to you about today. So we're going to give you a really general sort of overview of influencer marketing and some of the trends, and talk to you about the work of AiMCO and the Code of Practice. And there'll be plenty of time for questions along the way as well. So with me is Detch Singh, who is our chair. He is the founder and CEO of Hypetap, which is one of Australia's leading influencer marketing and content agencies. So he's your expert today, and you can ask him anything, and I'm sure he'll have an answer. So let's get into this. Just have to try and progress these slides. Yeah, I should have found it. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep, we can see that slide, yep.
Okay. Let's just move straight into some stats. So basically, influencer marketing is well and truly mainstream. You can see there from 2015, it's just had an incredible growth spurt. Now,
I don't think the right slide's up. I think it's still the cover slide.
Okay, we are having a few problems with this because when I'm in the presentation, Sam, you have it on PDF. Do you want to share it from PDF?
Yeah, I think we can do that. Beck, can you line that up?
Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what was happening there.
Sorry, guys, this will be a few seconds before we bring this up.
Anyway, let me keep talking. So since 2015, it's now jumped to being worth about $14 billion worldwide, even though we think that's probably undercooked. And it will continue to grow. There's been quite a growth spurt, and I think Detch will be able to tell you a little bit more about his experience regarding that. What we're also seeing is that obviously there's new platforms, and at one point Instagram was really the main platform. We're now seeing TikTok take up and encroach it quite dramatically. So now over half of marketers will be using TikTok as a key platform. So it's gone from being a novelty to a mainstay in social media marketing and influencer marketing. Detch, you might like to talk to that in terms of what you're seeing with your clients.
Yeah, certainly.
Platforms.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, probably about a year ago, TikTok was featuring in probably about 10 to 15% of our campaigns. Towards the end of last year, probably 50% of the influencer marketing campaigns that we were running were either predominantly TikTok or, you know, featured a considerable amount of TikTok content. So it's taking a huge amount of share when it comes to creator content, and certainly the creator campaigns that we're running, that's for sure. live. We've got some
Yep.
slides.
Yep, sorry guys, I'll walk through these.
So go to slide 3, Sam. You can see there, this is out of the US. It's just showing the platforms used. This is for companies with 100 plus employees, but as I mentioned, it's kind of undercooked, and as Detch was indicating. That trend with TikTok and potentially any other new platforms will continue. And we've just got another slide on trends here, which I know Detch can chat to.
Yeah, there's a couple of key ones. I mean, the global creator economy being worth $100 billion is probably one just to think about creators as just content creators, but also brands in their own right. So you can think about the influencer marketing industry in a couple of ways. One being the brand collaborations that we see and we work with, but there's also creator merchandising and all these other things that influencers are doing to push that creator economy more broadly. And that's what really encompasses that $100 billion number. But I think the main one I want to talk about really is social commerce and how social is becoming the platform for sale for a lot of, I know for a lot of our clients, but also through influencers. That's a massive focus as well. And so you would have seen all the major social media platforms integrating so much around social commerce, but it's creators that are going to be seen to be driving that social commerce and actually driving purchase through those social media platforms through creator focus campaigns. So that's probably the major one that we'd be looking at. And I think if you want to think about social commerce and running it successfully, a lot of it is going to be led by creators and creator content and creator campaigns, but also measuring it through the right infrastructure is going to be really important for clients.
Okay, let's just talk to you a bit about AiMCO. I don't know how much you know about AiMCO, but it was launched in 2019, and it was an industry initiative driven by the industry coming to the AIMAA to ask for some support on best practice. On the next slide, we're just going to talk a little bit about the background and everything that was happening both here and globally at that time. So you're all advertising folk, and you all know the ACCC, and we all know about consumer law, but there's a fair bit of confusion around that, especially with influencers. They certainly don't necessarily understand it. What was happening back in 2018, 2019 is very much in the UK and in the US, the regulatory bodies started honing in on influencers and hidden advertising. So basically endorsements and promotion that was paid, but was not identified as such. Now, in the UK, they're continuing to do that, and they're a fair bit ahead of this marketplace, in fact, and they have a lot of guides under the ASA over there. The US have fined a number of influencers, and from time to time, they continue to do that. You know, in Australia, under Australian consumer law, you could be fined up to 10 million if you're a company for engaging in hidden advertising, and influencers could also be fined. But nothing has happened in this marketplace as yet. But given that kind of rumbling around the world, it was, I guess, a moment of clarity for the industry here, along with some of the other things that were happening. So on the next slide, let's just quickly touch base on Australian consumer law, just so we're all clear on that. So basically, there's two fundamental aspects of it, in that you must not engage in conduct that's likely to mislead or deceive, and you must not make false or misleading claims or statements. I think with regard to influencer marketing, and also Detch can talk to this a little bit as well, there was a perception that you had to disclose it because of the AiMCO Code of Ethics, that if you were adhering to the industry code of ethics, you would declare that it was advertising. But it's actually not only that, it's about meeting the law. If the fact that it's actually a paid endorsement and you're not clear about that, you're actually breaching consumer law. And Detch, you mentioned something about that, so you might like to just chat to everyone around what you've experienced in that area.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a lot of the clients we speak to, even talent management, don't realize that it is consumer law. And that's crazy to me because, you know, Josanne touched on some of the fines that the ACCC can actually put in place. And I think it's only a matter of time before that happens. We've seen, and Josanne's going to touch on this in a minute, we've seen like a lot happen in terms of ad standards and them outing talent or outing brands that aren't disclosing properly. And we're seeing the same, you know, all over the world. But I think it's really important that we realize it is consumer law. And if you don't do it properly for your clients, if you don't disclose appropriately on creator-based sponsored content, you're really at risk.
Yeah, and they may make a test case of anybody, of someone, anytime, I guess, is that point. Let's just, on the next slide, one of the things that happened back in 2019, and this was indicative of what was happening at that time, the Australian federal government did a campaign of Girls Make Your Move. It was about healthy living and promoting healthy living using influencers. What they found was that the vetting potentially of those influencers wasn't up to scratch. And so there was some embarrassment for the government. And they made an edict at that time that no government department was to use influencer marketing. That's obviously shifted, but this was the background that we had happening back in sort of 2019, just before the industry came together to form AiMCO. So let's have a look on the next slide as to what AiMCO actually is. The industry came together and set up the Australian Influencer Marketing Council, and primarily it had three key areas that we focused on: regulatory issues regarding the adherence to consumer law, so advertising disclosure of endorsed content, brand safety, so vetting of influencer talent, making sure that brands felt safe when they used influencers, and campaign delivery, because there's two sides of that. Intellectual property, we need to protect the influencers as much as have clarity for marketers around what content they're actually buying and can use. So they were three key pillars that we started working on with regard to addressing some of those issues in the marketplace. And we moved on setting up the guiding council. So just to give you a sense of how AiMCO is structured, as I mentioned, it's an arm of the AMAA. It's an industry body. It is run by the members, and we vote in a guiding council, which is, we voted one in 2019, and 2 years later, we've just revised that. So we re-vote every 2 years, or the members do. And the core pillars are transparency and accountability. And the focus of that is marketer confidence, best practice and accountability through industry standards, and industry leadership. So, champion industry awareness and supporting the influencer marketing ecosystem. So what can we tell you about the Code of Practice? I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. But we're going to give you a recap on it here today, and we'll talk about, the AANA ad standards. You can find the Code of Practice on our website. It's free for everyone, and you will probably find it a really good resource. It covers off transparency regarding influencer vetting practices, brand safety considerations, ad disclosure recommendations to meet consumer law, how to ensure you do appropriate briefs and contracts, covering off content rights, IP and contracts, and also around transparency of metrics and reporting. AiMCO is also working on a white paper at the moment on metrics, because as we know, and I think Detch touched on this and he can talk some more about it, measuring campaigns appropriately, measuring the activity is really important for marketers and their dollars, and assessing how it's worked. So in terms of our code, how did we set it up? Basically did a whole series of town halls. At that point, we had, in 2019, we had about 25 members, but we had town halls of even more people. Anyone in the influencer marketing ecosystem who wanted to join in the town halls was invited. And from that, we set up the Code of Practice, and we consulted with the AANA to make sure that it aligned with their code of ethics. We then went and updated it last year because ad standards had made some rulings after the AANA Code of Practice was updated. We also reference ABAC, Children's Guardian, and any other industry codes that are obviously important and relevant. Fundamentally, it's about, inspiring and managing a process where people understand how to have consistency, language and behaviours, and it provides a guide to anyone working in influencer marketing. It's really risk minimization, I guess. So, I would suggest you should all go to the website and download the Code of Practice, because it's a really important tool to help you in terms of any campaigns you do. And it protects against not only client reputational risk, but also it'll give you guidelines around the ACL, meeting the ACL, which I'm sure you're all across, but it doesn't hurt to actually understand the best things to do with regard to using influencers. The key linchpin around the ACL is obviously consistent and clear disclosure. So you can use native brand tools or platform tools, paid partnership, for instance, on Instagram. Not every platform has them though. So the really important thing is that in the contracts that you set up with influencers, you're very clear that they should include ad disclosure in their content. And if, I think that's a key point too, and Detch can probably talk to this as well. If the contract with the influencer and the brief is very clear, it actually protects both parties. It will protect the agency, or all parties, the agency, the marketer, and the influencer. And so we recommend set hashtags. Detch, you might like to talk there a little bit about contracts and how the market has shifted, because it's moved a fair bit since the early days, hasn't it? When it might have just been an email to an influencer to actually now being a lot more robust in how that's handled.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so much around contracting in the Code of Practice, but I know certainly when we started in 2013, influencers were even averse to signing a contract, right? Whereas now it's an expectation that you will have one as an agency or a client to give that influencer along with their brief. You should definitely, to Josanne's point, have something in there around disclosure in particular. And just some little tips and tricks around this. Be careful. There are some great native brand partnership tools like the one on Instagram that Josanne mentioned, but on TikTok, for example, you can't edit a caption, right? So if the influencer doesn't have disclosure in there in the first instance, it's actually really difficult to actually get it in there later. So make sure you vet their content before it goes live, make sure the disclosure's in there, and just be careful around things like that, because it's a hard thing to know if you haven't done something like that before. So if you don't have a native partnership tool, have it in the captions. There's something in the Code of Practice around there, but just be conscious of vetting that content before it goes live as well.
I mean, that's a really interesting point too, that every platform, that's okay, Sam, you can keep going, because the next point is about visibility, but every platform has different tools or may not have, a disclosure tool. So that's why the experts are good to engage with for your influencer marketing. I guess this is something that comes up a lot, and I see it actually in a lot of influencer content. They'll put hashtag ad, but it'll just be a little hashtag ad, and it'll be right at the bottom of a whole host of hashtags. That actually is not kind of adequate, and we really say it has to be upfront, first frame or first reveal. It should be stated at the beginning of a video, and if it's in a long video, it should be stated or pulled through. Live stream disclosures, it needs to be in there as well. The aim is to just make sure the consumer knows that that's a paid piece of content. So the next slide, we're just going to briefly talk to you about gifting, and I'll hand to Detch here, because anything that is value in kind, gifts or free product, that is paid. That is a paid piece of work. And there's a fair bit of confusion around that. And certainly in the early days of influencer marketing, that was one of the ways that marketers or advertisers thought they could kind of almost have a soft sell that wouldn't look like advertising. But it still is advertising. So Detch, I'll get you to talk to this because it's such an important area.
Yeah, it's been a huge one over the last few years, and particularly PR agencies that do, mail outs, right? It's for them that the way Ad Standards looks at this, and I've had great long chats with them about how they look at this is, look, no one sends an influencer a product with the expectation that they're not going to post about it or they're not going to get a benefit out of it, right? So that's going to be the general view is, yes, to Josanne's point, it is value in kind. It requires the same disclosure as if you're paying them. And that's basically how Ad Standards is going to look at it. It's how they've ruled on a lot of their rulings as well. So yeah, it's just one of those things that you should be really conscious of is even if you are gifting, even if it's contra, send a brief at the very least. You can say, look, it's optional to post, but if you decide to post, have some clear requirements around disclosure if they decide to post, because even though you don't have a contract, if you send them that product, you'll still be responsible on behalf of the brand will still be responsible for that disclosure. Because as far as Ad Standards is concerned, you still have some element of control as the advertiser when you send out that product.
Well, that's a great point for you to keep having a little update on Ad Standards and what has happened. So last year, Ad Standards was very active in influencer marketing or influencer content rulings, and we haven't seen a lot of it until last year. But I know Detch engaged a lot with the Ad Standards board, so we'll get you to give us an update, Detch, on that.
Yeah, and these are just some really good examples of some of the things we were talking about, particularly around gifting. Like you can see this Tom Ford example on the right, where they gifted Rosalia Russian some, I think it was some perfume, and she posted about it. And I believe that Estee Lauder even had a law firm respond to Ad Standards on their behalf, and it was about, well, we just gifted some product. It's got nothing to do with a paid promotion, but it was Ad Standards ruling around that to go, you know what, actually, you didn't send it for no reason. You expected her to post about it, and you don't send them gifts if you don't expect them to post about it. Same kind of thing with Anna Heinrich, but there's just been a lot of different types of rulings, and it's really difficult to get your head around all the different edge cases. A really good example of this is we do a lot of work with an apparel brand, and if an influencer posts about their product in a paid capacity, they have to disclose. But the question that we had of Ad Standards was, well, what if they're just posting about that piece of apparel by themselves later down the line? Even though it was gifted to them, 3 months ago, if they're just posting about it, how are they expected to disclose if it's not part of a campaign? And the response to that was, well, it really, really depends if it's part of an ongoing relationship. So if you've got an ongoing relationship with an influencer and they're just expected to disclose about that relationship whenever they're talking about those products and when they're tagging those products and brands. So yeah, it's really important that you brief influencers in appropriately around things like that. I mean, even us, we run thousands of campaigns a year at Hypetap, and one of the things that we didn't realize was if an influencer posts bonus content that wasn't part of their contract, if it's part of the campaign, they still have to disclose, right? So we had to amend all our briefing documents to say, hey, actually, even if you decide to post extra content about this, even if we haven't seen it, you have to disclose. So there's these rulings that Ad Standards has put out have been really helpful in that regard as well, to just give you a better idea of what's required, because it is so grey and there are so many different cases. It's important to just keep your head around them and be close to them.
I think too, on that whole disclosure thing, one thing to be aware of is it's really just about transparency. So Detch, it can just be in the caption, can't it, that I was gifted this product. Yep. So long as the influencer is clear and transparent. So we often, I think in the code, we also say it can be in the captioning. So, and then we're just open to questions now, Sam.
Guys, are there any questions? If you want to yell out a question whilst we have the guys on? Sometimes they're a bit quiet.
And it can be much broader than anything here around disclosure. If you've got any questions around the category in general, best practice, anything like that, we're more than happy to answer those too.
And you can put it in the chat feature as well if you're not comfortable. But it's not uncommon that we don't get any questions. Guys, if anyone does have a question, can we connect you guys or connect them to you, Josanne, to
Totally. Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay, well, what we'll do is, if no one's got any questions, we'll be able to share the details within the closed CEO LinkedIn group. Oh, here we go. There's one there from Mel Roberts.
Yep, that's great. Yep, sure.
Reach out. Okay, that's okay. So we'll connect everyone who wants it. We'll also share this presentation and also the video with everyone else who missed it. Thank you very much, guys, for participating and sharing with that. That was really interesting and probably as interesting, but also really important that everyone knows some of the legalities and rules around it, because it is infinitely more complicated and more complicated every year as media is. But this is another slippery slope where governance around it's really, really important. So thank you so much for putting a spotlight on it, sharing. AiMCO's the guys that you need to talk to when it comes to influencer marketing. If you need knowledge about it, they're the industry body. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. And we'll see you next week. JC Decay next week have a very, very good webinar up. So thank you very much. And we'll talk to everyone.